I sat in the debriefing room at Quantico, my eyes fixed on the digital recorder sitting on the metal table. The small red light blinked steadily, capturing every word for the official record. My body ached from wounds still healing beneath my clothes, but those pains seemed distant compared to the hollow emptiness inside me. 24 years with the night crew, and here I was, the last one standing. Colonel Patricia Adams sat across from me, her face illuminated by the glow of her tablet as she scrolled through classified files. The harsh fluorescent lights made her blonde hair, now streaked with gray, look almost white. Neither of us had spoken for several minutes. "Let's continue, Mitchell," she said without looking up. Her voice carried the practiced neutrality of someone who delivered both death sentences and commendations with the same tone. The operation in the Carpathian Mountains resulted in the complete elimination of the vampire nest. Confirmation came from satellite thermal imaging after the explosion. I nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "But not without casualties." Her blue eyes finally met mine. Robert Collins and Thomas Anderson. Their names hung in the air between us. Rob and Tommy, my brothers. The last connections to who I'd been when this all started. "Collins died in the initial engagement," I said. My voice sounded strange in my ears, detached. Broken neck. Elder got to him before we could establish a defensive position. Adams made a note on her tablet. "And Anderson?" "Covered my retreat after we set the charges. Last I saw him, he was holding the main corridor with the flamethrower." I paused, remembering the sound of Tommy's screams cutting through my radio before static took over. "He knew what he was doing, made sure I got out." She nodded, already aware of these details from my preliminary report. "The medical team indicates you were exposed to vampire blood during the firefight." My hand unconsciously moved to my chest where vampire blood had splashed through a tear in my tactical gear. The doctors had scrubbed me clean, tested my blood work, checked my pupils for signs of contamination. "I'm clear," I said. "Not enough contact for infection. The docs confirmed it." "Yes, physically, you're cleared for duty." She set her tablet down. "What concerns me is your psychological state." I almost laughed. Psychological state, as if there was a standard mental profile for a man who'd spent over 2 decades hunting creatures that shouldn't exist. "I'm requesting permission to retire from active duty, Colonel." The words came out more easily than I'd expected. I'd rehearsed them in my head for days, ever since watching the castle complex erupt into flames with Tommy still inside. Adams's expression hardened. "That's not possible right now, Mitchell. Your experience is irreplaceable. The vampire leadership may be eliminated, but there are still nests worldwide that will try to fill the power vacuum. With all due respect, I'm done." I leaned forward, feeling the stitches pull across my back. 24 years. I've lost everyone. Jason in Romania, Kev right after, Major Hughes in Chechnya, now Rob and Tommy. I shook my head. "I've got nothing left to give." "This isn't about what you have left to give." Her voice took on a sharper edge. "It's about your duty to national security, to global security." "My duty?" This time I did laugh, a harsh sound that bounced off the concrete walls. "I've fulfilled any duty I signed up for 100 times over. None of us expected to live this long, not doing what we do." Adams closed the folder in front of her. "The night crew program is still classified at the highest levels. Your retirement would require extensive debriefing and monitoring protocols. You know too much to simply walk away." That was when I decided to play my only card. "What if I went public?" The question landed like a grenade between us. Adams went very still. "Excuse me? What if I told the world everything? About vampires, about the night crew, about 2 decades of classified operations across 6 continents?" I held her gaze. "About how many soldiers we've lost fighting a war the public doesn't know exists." "That would be treason, Mitchell." Her voice was ice. "You'd spend the rest of your life in a federal prison." "Maybe, I shrugged. Or maybe people deserve to know what's really out there, what their tax dollars have been funding, the real reason behind those terrorist attacks in Libya and Syria. Adams studied me, likely trying to determine if I was bluffing. I wasn't. "You're exhausted and traumatized," she said finally. "This isn't you talking. This is exactly me talking, for the first time in years." I gestured to the recorder. "Turn that off. Let's discuss this like people who've known each other for 2 decades. After a long moment, she reached out and pressed the stop button. The red light died. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious." I met her eyes. "I want out, Patricia. Completely out. No monitoring, no debriefing beyond today, no handlers checking in. I've earned that much." She was quiet for a long time, calculating. Adams had always been good at finding angles, at seeing 3 moves ahead. It was what made her an effective handler. "I'll give you 48 hours, she said finally. "Take some time, get some rest, reconsider what you're threatening to do and what it would mean for national security. And then we'll discuss your retirement terms." She stood up, gathering her files. "But Mitchell, don't make any rash decisions before we talk again, for both our sakes." I nodded, though we both knew my mind was made up. The medical wing had already cleared me, so I collected my personal effects from security: wallet, keys, phone. Everything felt strangely normal, like I was leaving after a routine checkup rather than the end of a life-defining career. Night had fallen by the time I walked out of the facility. The air was cool against my face, carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding forest. Cars moved along the distant highway, carrying people who lived in blissful ignorance of the creatures that hunted in the shadows. As I got into my car, I looked back at the nondescript government building where I'd spent so many hours being debriefed, patched up, and sent back out into the darkness. I knew with absolute certainty that I would never return to active duty. What I didn't know yet was exactly how I would tell the world the truth. But I had 48 hours to figure it out. I pulled into the parking spot outside my Arlington apartment building as the morning sun cast long shadows across the asphalt. My body felt heavy with exhaustion after the debriefing at Quantico, but my mind was racing. Adams had given me 48 hours to reconsider my threat. I planned to use every minute of that time. The apartment complex was quiet this early on a weekday. Most residents had already left for their government jobs or military postings. I nodded to Mrs. Geller from 3B as she walked her terrier, maintaining the facade of normalcy I'd perfected over 2 decades. Just another retired military guy living a quiet life. My apartment was on the 4th floor, corner unit with clear sightlines to all approaches. I'd chosen it 8 years ago for the security features as much as the location. Old habits. I unlocked 3 separate locks and disabled the alarm system before stepping inside. The place was sparse but functional. No photos adorned the walls, no mementos cluttered the surfaces. Nothing to suggest who I really was or what I'd seen. Nothing except what I kept hidden behind the false wall in my bedroom closet. I made coffee first, strong and black. My hands shook slightly as I lifted the mug to my lips. Not from fear, from anticipation. For the first time in 24 years, I was about to break my oath of secrecy. The weight of that decision pressed on me, but not as heavily as the weight of remaining silent. After finishing my coffee, I went to work. In the bedroom closet, I pushed aside hanging clothes and pressed on a specific spot on the back wall. A panel slid open, revealing a small storage space. Inside sat 4 waterproof cases I'd collected over the years. I pulled them out one by one and laid them on my bed. Each contained documents, photographs, and digital storage devices I'd secretly copied or preserved from night crew operations. Not comprehensive by any means, but enough to validate my story, enough to prove that monsters were real. Some might call it treason. I called it my insurance policy. I'd never intended to use these materials. They were meant to protect me if the program was ever shut down and those in charge decided loose ends needed tying up. But now they would serve a different purpose, telling the truth. At my desk, I booted up my laptop and created a new document. The blank page stared back at me, waiting for 24 years of classified history to fill it. I took a deep breath and began typing. The Night Crew, a first-hand account by David Mitchell, U.S. Army, Retour. I stared at the title for a long moment. Once I started writing, there would be no going back. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I continued. In January 1998, I was serving with the 75th Ranger Regiment when I received orders to report to an unnamed facility in Virginia for specialized training. No explanation was given, only that I had been specifically selected based on my combat record and psychological profile. 12 of us arrived that first day, elite operators pulled from every branch of the military. None of us knew why we were there. I paused, remembering that first day. The confusion, the speculation among the recruits, the knowing looks from the senior officers who met us. I continued writing. Jason Turner arrived on the same transport. We'd been friends since basic training, having served 3 tours together. His presence made the mysterious reassignment less concerning. If Jay was picked for this, whatever this was, then it had to be important. Neither of us realized we'd just entered a world that would eventually kill us all. I spent the next hour detailing those first days, how we'd assembled in that nondescript government building, the 12 of us eyeing each other, sizing up the competition. All of us cream of the crop operators with distinguished service records. Our commanding officer was Major William Hughes, a stern-faced career officer with intelligence community connections. He'd greeted us with a speech about national security and unconventional threats that somehow managed to reveal nothing about our actual purpose. You've been selected because you've proven yourselves adaptable, discreet, and mentally resilient, Hughes had told us that first day. The training you're about to undergo will test those qualities beyond anything you've experienced. Some of you won't make it through. Those who do will be defending this country against threats most Americans will never know existed. We'd exchanged glances, assuming this was about counterterrorism or perhaps some new domestic threat. Jason had nudged me, whispering, "Cult warfare, you think? Waco-type situations?" It seemed plausible at the time. None of us could have guessed the truth. The training began immediately and defied all conventional military doctrine. We drilled in close-quarters combat using silver-tipped ammunition and specialized blades. When we asked why silver, our instructors spoke vaguely about psychological warfare and enemy vulnerability to symbolic materials. We studied historical texts on folklore and mythology from cultures around the world, focusing on predatory creatures and how ancient societies defended against them. We were told this would help us understand the psychology of certain extremist groups who modeled themselves after legendary monsters. The night training was the most intense. We learned to fight in complete darkness, to trust our other senses when visibility was zero. We trained with modified night vision equipment and thermal imaging systems unlike anything I'd seen before. The tech was cutting edge, designed to detect body heat at greater distances and with more precision than standard military gear. I wrote steadily through the morning, documenting how confusion had gradually given way to acceptance. We were soldiers. We followed orders, even when those orders involved studying ancient Romanian burial practices or learning to handle equipment that seemed designed for hunting rather than combat. The physical training pushed us beyond our already exceptional limits. We ran extreme distances carrying heavy packs. We practiced sprinting in short, explosive bursts. We learned to operate in small, coordinated teams that could move in perfect silence. Everything seemed designed to prepare us for pursuing and capturing enemies who were unusually fast and strong. By March 1998, our original group of 12 had been reduced to 9. 2 washed out during the extreme physical requirements. Another requested transfer after a night exercise triggered a psychological break. None of us judged him. The training had begun to feel increasingly surreal. My fingers paused over the keyboard as I recalled a particular training session from April. I typed, "The first time I suspected something truly unusual was happening came during a specialized weapons demonstration. A senior instructor I'd never seen before arrived with a crate of what looked like modified flamethrowers. Fire is one of your most effective resources," he explained, not bothering to introduce himself. "When conventional weapons fail, fire will often succeed." Jason leaned toward me. "Against what? We fighting dragons now?" The instructor heard him and fixed Jason with an unnerving stare. "In a manner of speaking, Turner. In a manner of speaking." That night, Jason and I speculated in hushed voices about what we'd gotten ourselves into. Biological warfare? Some new chemical weapon that was vulnerable to extreme heat? We came up with increasingly wild theories, never once hitting on the truth. If someone had suggested we were being trained to hunt vampires, we would have laughed them out of the barracks. I paused again, staring at what I'd written. The absurdity of it still struck me, even after all these years, even after everything I'd seen. I continued. By November 1998, the remaining 9 of us had been formed into what our superiors called the Night Crew. The name seemed like dark humor at the time, a reference to our extensive training in nocturnal operations. We received specialized equipment, modified weapons, custom-designed body armor with reinforced neck protection, and communication systems that operated on frequencies outside standard military bands. Major Hughes finally briefed us on our first deployment. We were headed to Romania in January to extract an undercover operative who had gone silent after reporting unusual enemy activity in a remote village near the Carpathian Mountains. "This mission will test everything you've learned," Hughes told us. "Some of you still don't believe what we've been preparing you for. After Romania, you will." His words proved prophetic in ways none of us could have anticipated. I stopped writing and checked the time. I'd been at it for hours, the sun now high in the sky. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since the day before. I saved the document and stood up, stretching my stiff muscles. The coffee pot was empty. I made a fresh batch and assembled a sandwich from the meager contents of my refrigerator. As I ate, I thought about what came next in my account: Romania, our first encounter. The mission that had killed 4 of our 9-man team and shown us that monsters were real. The mission where Jason had been bitten, turned, and I'd had to put a silver bullet through his head. I wasn't ready to write that part yet. Not while eating lunch, not while the sun was still up. Some memories belonged to the darkness. Instead, I returned to my documents, organizing them chronologically. Reports, photographs, medical examinations of victims, autopsy results from terminated vampires. I had samples of specialized ammunition, recordings of debriefings, and maps showing confirmed nest locations across 6 continents. My phone remained silent. Adams was giving me my 48 hours, but I knew she was already putting contingency plans in place. The moment I went public, they would move to discredit me, arrest me, or worse. I needed to prepare my evidence carefully, creating packages that would reach multiple outlets simultaneously if anything happened to me. I needed a journalist, someone with credibility, resources, and the courage to publish something that would sound insane until they saw the proof. The Washington Post seemed like the logical choice. Their investigative team had broken stories that changed history before. As afternoon wore on, I returned to my writing. I added details about our specialized equipment, our command structure, and the compartmentalized nature of the program that kept most government officials in the dark about what we really did. I wrote until the light outside my windows began to fade. Tomorrow, I would continue, documenting our first real encounter with the creatures we'd been trained to hunt. The mission that had transformed us from skeptical soldiers into believers. Tomorrow I would write about Romania, about Jason, about the night I learned monsters were real. But for now, I closed my laptop and prepared for darkness. Old habits die hard, and night had always been when we were most vulnerable. I returned to my laptop the next morning. The blank document waited for me, cursor blinking where I'd left off. The coffee next to me steamed in the early light coming through the window. I'd slept poorly, my dreams filled with faces of the dead. Now it was time to write about how they died. I took a deep breath and began typing about Romania. January 1999. Our first real mission. The official briefing had been minimal. A Green Beret named Zachary Roberts had gone dark while working undercover with Romanian militia forces near the Carpathian Mountains. His last communication contained fragmented reports of nocturnal attacks and civilian casualties with unusual characteristics. Command suspected some kind of biological weapon testing by local insurgents. We knew better by then, or at least we suspected. Our 9-man team deployed under cover of a standard search and rescue operation. The flight into Romania was tense with unspoken fears. We'd spent months training for something none of us fully believed in yet. Now we might face it. "Think we'll actually see one?" Jason had asked, checking his modified rifle for the 10th time. The silver-tipped rounds gleamed in the dim light of the transport. "See what?" I'd replied. "The training never actually said what we're hunting." Jay had grinned, the expression tight with nervous energy. "Come on, Dave. Silver bullets, night operations, specialized neck armor. Either we're hunting werewolves or vampires, and the full moon was last week." I'd laughed it off. So had everyone else. None of us really believed. Not yet. We landed 20 miles from the village and approached on foot through dense forest. The cold bit through our tactical gear, snow crunching under our boots. The village appeared on satellite as a small cluster of buildings nestled in a narrow valley. Population, roughly 200. Roberts had been embedded there for 3 months, monitoring suspected weapons trafficking. "I've got no heat signatures," Tommy Anderson said, scanning through his thermal gear as we approached the outskirts. "Village should have at least 100 people showing up." "Power outage?" Kevin Hayes suggested from his position as rear guard. "It's below freezing. They'd be huddled indoors with fires going." Major Hughes, who'd insisted on leading this first mission personally, raised his fist for a halt. "Mitchell, Turner, with me for recon. The rest of you establish a perimeter." Jason and I followed Hughes toward the village center. The silence pressed against my ears. No dogs barking, no voices, not even smoke from chimneys despite the bitter cold. The first body we found was an old man sprawled across his doorway. His skin was gray, his eyes open and glazed with frost. 2 puncture wounds marked his neck, the surrounding skin bruised dark purple. "Check for a pulse," Hughes ordered, though we all knew he was dead. I pressed my fingers to the old man's neck. The skin felt like ice. Nothing. "Look at the lack of blood," Hughes said, his voice clinical. "Around the wounds. Should be dried blood, but there's nothing." Jason stood a few paces back, his face pale, like something drained him. We found more bodies as we moved through the village. Men, women, children, all with the same wounds, all bloodless. Some looked peaceful, as if they'd just fallen asleep. Others showed signs of struggle, their faces frozen in terror. "Sir, I'm getting a heat signature," Jason said suddenly, checking his modified thermal gear. "Single person, building at the far end of the village." Hughes radioed the rest of the team to move in, and we approached the building, a small church with wooden doors barred from the outside. Someone had wanted to keep whatever was inside from getting out. "Ready weapons," Hughes ordered. "Silver rounds. Remember your training." I remember thinking how absurd it felt, loading silver ammunition while standing among corpses in a frozen Romanian village. Part of me still expected to find terrorists or some new biological weapon. We removed the wooden bar and pushed open the church doors. The interior was dark, the air stale with the smell of candle wax and fear. "Zachary Roberts," Hughes called out. "U.S. Special Forces, we're here to extract you." A rustling came from beneath the altar. Weapon raised, I approached to find a man huddled in a space barely large enough for a child. His face was gaunt, eyes wide and bloodshot. He clutched a silver crucifix in one hand and a combat knife in the other. "Roberts?" I asked. The man's eyes darted around wildly. "They'll come back after dark. They always come back after dark." Hughes knelt beside me. "We're getting you out of here. What happened to the villagers?" Roberts laughed, a broken sound. "What do you think happened? They fed. Night after night they fed until there was no one left." "Who fed?" Hughes pressed. "Vampires." Roberts spat the word. "Actual goddamn vampires. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen them tear my contact's throat out and drink his blood." None of us spoke. The word hung in the air, finally stated plainly after months of implied training. "How long have you been hiding?" I asked. 3 days. I barricaded myself in here when they killed the last family." He held up the crucifix. "This keeps them away, and they can't enter a church without invitation." Jason exchanged a look with me. The folklore aspects of our training suddenly made much more sense. "We need to move before sunset," Hughes said, checking his watch. "Roberts, can you walk?" Roberts nodded, though he looked barely strong enough to stand. I helped him to his feet, while Hughes radioed the team to prepare for immediate extraction. Our helicopter was waiting 20 miles away, and darkness would fall in less than 3 hours. We never made it out of the village. The attack came suddenly, not from outside, but from beneath the church itself. The floor exploded upward as pale figures erupted from what must have been an ancient crypt. They moved faster than anything human, a blur of white skin and dark clothing. "Contact!" Hughes shouted, opening fire. The next few minutes were chaos. Silver rounds tore through the creatures, making them shriek with inhuman voices. But there were too many, at least a dozen against our team of 9. I saw Ramirez go down first, his neck torn open by elongated fangs. Peters was next, lifted bodily and thrown against the stone wall with enough force to shatter his spine. "Fall back," Hughes ordered. "Defensive formation, protect Roberts." We fought our way out of the church, firing as we retreated. The creatures followed but seemed hesitant in the fading daylight. It gave us just enough advantage to reach the village center where the rest of our team waited. "What the hell are those things?" Williams shouted as we joined them. "Exactly what we trained for," Hughes replied. "Form a perimeter, back to back. They're faster than us, but the silver hurts them." We formed a circle, Roberts in the center. The vampires, I can write that word now without feeling absurd, kept to the shadows of buildings, occasionally darting forward to test our defenses before retreating. "They're waiting for full dark," Roberts said, his voice shaking. "Then they'll overwhelm us." "That's not happening," Hughes said. "Extraction point is 20 miles east. We move as a unit, double time." We began our retreat, maintaining formation as we backed out of the village. The vampires followed, keeping pace just beyond the range of our weapons, occasionally darting close enough for a shot before vanishing again. The woods offered cover but also limited our visibility. We moved as quickly as possible while maintaining our defensive position. The sun sank lower, shadows lengthening between the trees. That was when they hit us in force. They came from all directions at once. One moment the forest seemed empty. The next, we were surrounded by pale, hissing creatures with black eyes and blood-stained mouths. Williams went down screaming, 2 vampires tearing at him from different directions. Cooper emptied his magazine into one's chest, causing it to shriek and retreat, but another took its place instantly. "Keep moving!" Hughes shouted. "Head for the extraction point!" We broke into a run, firing blindly behind us. I grabbed Roberts, half carrying him as he stumbled alongside me. Jason took point, cutting a path through the underbrush. I didn't see him get bitten. In the chaos of our retreat, with gunfire and screams echoing through the trees, Jason had gotten separated from us briefly. When he rejoined the group, he seemed fine, winded and wild-eyed, but moving under his own power. "Lost them for a minute," he gasped, "but they're still coming." We ran for what felt like hours, but was probably less than 40 minutes. When we finally reached the extraction clearing, only 6 of us remained. Hughes, Jason, Kevin Hayes, Tommy Anderson, Rob Collins, and myself. Plus Roberts, who collapsed the moment we stopped moving. "Where's Cooper?" I asked, my breath making clouds in the cold air. "Didn't make it," Tommy said grimly. "They pulled him into the trees about a mile back." The helicopter appeared on the horizon, a black dot growing larger against the darkening sky. Hughes fired a signal flare to guide it in. "We're not out of this yet," he warned. "Form a perimeter. They might make one last attempt." The helicopter touched down, its rotors whipping the snow into a blinding curtain. We backed toward it, weapons still trained on the tree line. "Get Roberts in first," Hughes ordered. Tommy and Rob half-carried the semi-conscious Green Beret to the helicopter. Kevin Hayes provided cover, scanning the trees with his rifle raised. That's when Jason began to convulse. It started with a violent shudder that ran through his entire body. He dropped to his knees, his rifle falling from his hands. "Jay!" I moved toward him, but Hughes grabbed my arm. "Stay back," he ordered, raising his weapon. "What are you doing?" I tried to pull away. "He needs help." "Look at his eyes," Hughes said quietly. Jason looked up at us, and I saw that his eyes had changed. The blue irises were gone, replaced by an expanding darkness that soon filled the entire eye socket. Black, bottomless eyes stared from my best friend's face. "Oh God," I whispered. "He's been bitten." "Mitchell, get to the helicopter," Hughes commanded, his aim never wavering from Jason. "I'm not leaving him," I said. Jason's body contorted again, his mouth opening in a silent scream. When his lips pulled back, I saw the teeth, normal human teeth elongating into fangs before my eyes. "Dave," Jason gasped, his voice still recognizable despite the transformation happening within him. "Dave, something's wrong. I can't." Another spasm cut off his words. His fingers curled into claws, digging into the frozen ground. "Mitchell, that's an order," Hughes shouted. "Get to the—" Jason moved with impossible speed. One moment he was on his knees in the snow. The next he had Hughes pinned to the ground, fangs bared. I raised my weapon but couldn't fire. This was Jason, my friend since basic training. The guy who'd saved my life twice in Afghanistan. Kevin Hayes had no such hesitation. He fired a burst of silver rounds into Jason's back. Jason arched, an inhuman shriek tearing from his throat, then whirled to face Hayes. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Jason crossed the 10 feet between them in the blink of an eye. His hand punched straight through Hayes' tactical vest, emerging red and dripping from his back. Hayes didn't even have time to scream. His eyes went wide with shock as Jason yanked his hand free, then latched onto his neck with newly formed fangs. I finally fired. 3 silver rounds hit Jason in the shoulder, spinning him away from Hayes' collapsing body. He turned to me, blood smeared across his mouth and chin. His eyes were completely black now, but something in them still recognized me. "Dave," he said, his voice a raspy approximation of the one I knew. "Run!" He tensed to spring. I knew I had less than a second before he would be on me, doing to me what he'd done to Hayes. The helicopter rotors thundered behind me, Hughes shouting for me to get aboard. I fired one last time, a single silver bullet through Jason Turner's forehead. His body crumpled to the snow, black eyes still fixed on me. I don't know what I expected. Dissolution into dust like the movies, perhaps. But he just lay there, looking almost human again, except for the fangs still visible between his parted lips. "Mitchell, now!" Hughes dragged me backward toward the helicopter. We lifted off as dark shapes emerged from the tree line, dozens of pale figures drawn by the commotion. They reached for the helicopter as it rose, jumping with inhuman strength, but falling short of the skids. The last thing I saw as we banked away was Jason's body in the snow, surrounded by creatures that had been human once, just like him. The flight back to our secure facility was silent. Roberts had passed out from exhaustion and blood loss. Hughes stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. Tommy and Rob checked and rechecked their weapons, as if expecting another attack even thousands of feet in the air. I sat apart from them, Jason's final moments playing on repeat in my mind. The friend I'd known was gone the instant the transformation began, replaced by something that only wore his face. I tried to tell myself that. It helped, but not enough. We landed at the facility in the early hours of the morning. Medical teams rushed Roberts to treatment while the rest of us were escorted to immediate decontamination. They tested our blood, examined us for bites or scratches, then isolated us in separate rooms for 24 hours of observation. When they finally released us, Major Hughes called the 4 survivors, myself, Tommy, Rob, and him, into a secured briefing room. "You've seen the enemy," he said without preamble. "You know what we're fighting now." "Vampires," Rob said, the words still sounding ridiculous despite everything we'd witnessed. Hughes nodded. "A classified threat that's existed for centuries. Most vampire activity has historically been isolated and manageable. A turned individual here, a small nest there. But in the last decade, they've become more organized, more strategic." "How long has the government known?" Tommy asked. "Since World War II, officially. Vampire activity spiked during the chaos of the European theater. The first anti-vampire unit was formed in 1943, though they operated under different pretenses." I finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell us from the beginning? Why all the secrecy during training?" Hughes leaned forward. "Would you have believed me? If I'd stood up on day one and said, 'Gentlemen, you're being trained to hunt vampires,' how many of you would have taken it seriously?" None of us argued. He was right. "What happens to someone who's bitten?" I asked, thinking of how quickly Jason had turned. "Transformation typically takes 24 to 72 hours after infection," Hughes explained. Turner's case was accelerated, possibly due to the amount of vampire blood that entered his system during the attack. Once the transformation begins, there's no stopping it. The human consciousness is overwhelmed and replaced. "So that wasn't really Jason at the end," I said, needing to hear it confirmed. Hughes hesitated. "The evidence suggests some fragment of the original personality may remain briefly during transition, but it's quickly subsumed by the vampire instinct to feed." He paused. "You did the right thing, Mitchell. Turner was gone. You saved the rest of us." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "Now you have a choice," Hughes continued. "You've seen what we're up against. You know the stakes. This program, the Night Crew, exists because vampires are real and somebody has to hunt them. You can continue with us, or you can accept a transfer with appropriate non-disclosure agreements." "Transfer where?" Rob asked. "Back to your original units, officially. In reality, a desk job far from anything classified, with regular psychological evaluations and monitoring for the rest of your careers." Tommy didn't hesitate. "I'm staying. Those things killed Williams and the others. They need to pay." Rob nodded his agreement. "Someone has to do this job." Hughes looked at me. "Mitchell?" I thought about Jason, about the friend I'd lost and the monster I'd been forced to kill, about how easily it could have been me instead, turned into something that would slaughter without remorse. "I'm staying," I said. "I've got nothing left to lose now." Hughes nodded, as if he'd expected nothing less. "Training resumes tomorrow. We'll integrate what you've learned from this mission. Next time, we'll be better prepared. Next time." The words echoed in my head as I left the briefing room. There would be many next times over the coming decades. Many more monsters. Many more friends lost. I stopped typing, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The cup of coffee beside me had gone cold hours ago. Outside my apartment window, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. Soon, it would be evening, then night, the time when they hunted. I continued typing into the evening, driven by a need to document everything before Adams made her move. The Romania mission marked only the beginning of my career with the Night Crew. 24 years stretched ahead of me on that timeline. years filled with blood, loss, and a secret war fought in shadows. After Romania, our training intensified. The 4 survivors, Hughes, Tommy, Rob, and myself, became the core around which a new team was built. 6 more operators joined us within months, selected for their combat skills and psychological resilience. None received the gradual introduction we had. Hughes told them about vampires on day 1, showing them footage from our body cameras in Romania. Half believed immediately. The rest came around after their first encounter. My fingers moved steadily across the keyboard, chronicling our early missions throughout Eastern Europe. Vampire activity had spiked in the post-Soviet chaos, with nests establishing themselves in abandoned military installations and remote villages. We hunted them methodically, developing tactics that played to our strengths as humans, coordinated teamwork against creatures that, while stronger and faster, often acted on predatory instinct rather than strategy. That changed around 2001. We began encountering nests with security systems, lookouts, and escape plans. The vampires were learning, adapting, communicating across distances. What had once been isolated pockets of infection became a loosely organized network. I paused to make more coffee, my 3rd cup since starting. The apartment had grown dark around me, but I didn't turn on lights. Some habits never die, keeping a low profile, minimizing my visible presence. I opened the blinds just enough to check the parking lot below. No suspicious vehicles, no signs of surveillance, not yet. Back at my laptop, I wrote about our mission to Libya in 2002. Intelligence had identified a vampire infiltration within Gaddafi's inner circle. 3 government officials had been turned, using their positions to cover up feeding activities and turn others. Our extraction team went in under diplomatic cover, eliminating the nest and staging their deaths as a terrorist attack. The official story made international news. The truth remained buried in our classified reports. I documented similar operations in Syria, Afghanistan, Brazil, and dozens of other locations. Each mission came with its own challenges. Desert operations meant limited darkness for vampires to operate, but also limited cover for our teams. Urban environments offered civilians for them to feed on and blend among, while giving us maneuverability problems. Each environment required different tactics, different weapons loadouts, different approaches. Throughout it all, we lost people. Garcia in Afghanistan, taken by a vampire that had burrowed into a cave system. Chen in Moscow, infected during an ambush and executed by his own request before the transformation completed. Williams in Sao Paulo, his throat torn out while covering our retreat. Then came Chechnya in 2003, the mission that took Major Hughes from us. Intelligence had located a nest operating within a separatist compound. The vampires had formed a mutually beneficial relationship with the rebels, protection during daylight hours in exchange for combat advantages at night. Hughes insisted on leading the operation personally, as this partnership between vampires and humans represented a dangerous escalation. Our 10-person team infiltrated during daylight, planning to eliminate the nest before sunset. Everything went according to plan until we discovered the nest was twice the size of our intelligence estimates. 20+ vampires instead of the expected 8 to 10. Hughes ordered an immediate withdrawal, but we were cut off by returning rebel forces. The fighting continued past sunset, allowing the vampires to join the battle. I tried to type dispassionately about what happened next, but my hands shook on the keyboard. Hughes had ordered us to fall back to a defensive position in an abandoned apartment building. He took point, covering our retreat with modified silver fragmentation grenades. 4 vampires rushed him simultaneously. I saw him take down 2 before the others overwhelmed him. His last act was to trigger the incendiary charges on his tactical vest, taking 3 more vampires with him in the explosion. I was the senior officer remaining. With Hughes gone, command fell to me in the middle of the worst firefight we'd ever experienced. I ordered a split-team maneuver, Rob taking half our remaining forces to create a diversion while I led the rest to secure an extraction point. The night ended with 3 more team members dead, but the rest of us made it out. I was 27 years old and suddenly in command of the night crew. The screen blurred before me. I rubbed my eyes, aware of the weight of memory. Writing this history meant reliving every mission, every death, but it had to be done. The world needed to know what we'd sacrificed. I continued typing, documenting how the vampire threat evolved through the 2000s. They began using technology against us, security cameras to detect our approaches, communication devices to coordinate between nests, even social media to identify isolated targets for feeding. By 2008, we had evidence that vampires had infiltrated government positions in at least 7 countries. Not high-level posts that would attract scrutiny, but mid-level bureaucratic positions that offered access to records, resources, and cover-ups. A vampire working in a regional medical examiner's office could alter causes of death. One in a police department could bury reports of attacks. I wrote about our response, developing new identification protocols, ultraviolet scanning technology that could detect the subtle differences in how vampire skin reflected light, thermal imaging that revealed their slightly lower body temperature. The technological arms race continued through the decade, each side developing countermeasures to the other's advantages. Through it all, the night crew rotated personnel as we lost operators. Tommy Anderson and Rob Collins remained constants alongside me, the 3 of us the only survivors from the early days. New recruits came with specialized skills, former CIA field officers, Navy SEALs, even an NSA analyst who helped us track vampire communications. The psychological toll was immense. I documented the mandatory therapy sessions, the high suicide rate among retired night crew members, the alcoholism and substance abuse that many turned to. Knowing that monsters existed, that they walked among us wearing human faces, it changed a person permanently. Many couldn't handle it. I sometimes wondered why I could. I wrote about 2012, when we discovered the first evidence of vampire bloodlines with distinct abilities. A nest in northern Japan moved with even greater speed than we'd previously encountered. A group in South Africa demonstrated unusual strength and resilience to silver. A single elder vampire in Peru could exert mind control over distances we'd thought impossible. These variations complicated our operations. Standard tactics failed against evolved abilities. We lost 8 operators in a 6-month period before adapting our approach. I authorized research into the biological differences between bloodlines, leading to specialized weapons and tactics for each variant. The elimination techniques evolved with our understanding. Early on, we relied on silver ammunition and decapitation. Later, we developed UV radiation weapons, chemical compounds that reacted with vampire physiology, and environmental tactics that trapped them in vulnerable positions. I documented them all, providing future hunters with a comprehensive guide should the night crew program end with my retirement. By 2015, our intelligence network had identified a hierarchy forming among global vampire populations. Older, more powerful vampires establishing dominance over younger ones, territories being claimed and defended, communication channels developing between previously isolated groups. They were organizing, becoming something closer to a shadow society than scattered predators. This evolution made them more dangerous, but also more vulnerable. Hierarchies meant predictable behaviors. Communication channels could be monitored. Power structures could be destabilized by removing key figures. We shifted strategy from elimination of individual nests to targeted removal of leadership. Cut off the head, and the body would be easier to manage. The night crew began focusing on identifying and eliminating vampire elders, those who had lived decades or centuries and coordinated activities across regions. These high-value target missions carried extreme risk. Elder vampires possessed abilities and experience that made them formidable opponents. Our success rate dropped, and our casualty rate rose. Between 2015 and 2020, we lost 14 operators while successfully eliminating only 7 elder vampires. But the strategy worked. Without leadership, vampire activities became disorganized, making cleanup operations against isolated nests more manageable. Global attacks decreased by 60% by late 2019. giving us hope that we might eventually contain the threat to manageable levels. Then came reports of a consolidation. Intelligence from multiple sources indicated the remaining vampire leadership was gathering in one location, a return to the Carpathian Mountains, where some of the oldest bloodlines originated. They were planning something unprecedented, a coordinated global emergence from the shadows. After centuries of secrecy, they intended to reveal themselves to humanity on their terms. I couldn't allow that to happen, not after everything we'd sacrificed to keep them contained. By this point, the night crew had dwindled to a core team of 7 operators. Only 3 of us had more than 5 years' experience: myself, Rob Collins, and Tommy Anderson. The other 4 were competent but relatively new, lacking the instincts that came from decades of hunting. I knew the mission carried extreme risk, but the intelligence was clear. This might be our only chance to eliminate the remaining leadership structure in one operation. I authorized the mission despite Colonel Adams's concerns about our limited manpower. My hands paused over the keyboard. I hadn't yet written about that final mission 3 days ago, the one that had left me as the sole survivor of the night crew, but that could wait until tomorrow. I'd spent hours documenting decades of classified operations, and exhaustion was setting in. I saved the document and checked the time. It was past midnight. 24 of my 48 hours had elapsed. Tomorrow, I would finish my account, contact a journalist, and set things in motion that couldn't be stopped. I closed my laptop and rubbed my eyes. Decades of hunting vampires had taught me to respect the night, to understand that darkness brought vulnerability. But soon, I would bring everything into the light. The secret war would be secret no more. I returned to my laptop the next morning. 24 hours remained on the clock Adams had given me. The document waited, cursor blinking at the point where I'd stopped writing. The most recent mission, the one that had left me alone, still needed to be documented. I took a long breath, made fresh coffee, and began typing. Our final mission started 3 days ago. Intelligence had been tracking unusual vampire movements for months, elders abandoning established territories, younger vampires relocating in coordinated patterns. All signs pointed to something unprecedented, a gathering of leadership. After decades of operating in isolated cells, the remaining vampire elders had called a summit in the Carpathian Mountains. The location wasn't a coincidence. The oldest vampiric bloodlines originated there, and returning to their ancestral ground carried symbolic weight for their kind. Our sources indicated they were planning a coordinated global emergence, revealing themselves to humanity on their terms rather than ours. The implications were catastrophic: public panic, religious upheaval, governmental collapse in regions where vampires had already infiltrated power structures. Everything the night crew had fought to prevent for 24 years. Our team had been reduced to just 3, myself, Robert Collins, and Thomas Anderson, the only survivors from the early years. The newer recruits had been reassigned to containment operations in North America, while we handled what was classified as a high-value target elimination. I remembered looking across the briefing table at Rob and Tommy. We were older now, faces lined with years of night operations and losses. Rob's reddish-brown beard had gone mostly gray. Tommy's once dark skin had paled from too many years operating in darkness. None of us spoke the obvious truth. This mission was probably a one-way trip. Intelligence estimated at least 40 vampires at the location, including 12 elders with centuries of experience. The plan called for a stealth insertion at dawn when most would be dormant, setting charges at structural points throughout the ancient castle complex, then remote detonation after extraction. Clean, simple, and completely unrealistic, given our limited manpower. "This is a suicide mission," Rob had said during our final planning session. Not complaining, just stating a fact. Tommy nodded, checking his custom flamethrower for the 10th time. "Always figured we'd go out together." I hadn't responded. As team leader, I could have requested more personnel, but there weren't any to spare. Global vampire activity had spiked as their leadership gathered, requiring containment teams on 5 continents. We were it, the last of the old guard, sent to end what we'd started decades ago. We deployed from a blacked-out helicopter at 0500 hours, dropped 5 miles from the target to avoid detection. The Carpathian forests were thick with morning mist as we moved toward the castle. The structure rose from the mountainside like it had grown there. Ancient stone walls merged with the natural rock face, creating a fortress that had stood for centuries. Just like old times, Tommy whispered as we approached. Full circle back to Romania. He was right. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Our first mission as the night crew had been in these mountains. Now our last would be too. We identified 3 entry points from our intelligence briefing. The main gate was immediately ruled out, too exposed, likely guarded even during daylight. A delivery entrance on the eastern side offered better cover but unknown interior layout. The third option was a maintenance tunnel that our satellite imaging had detected, a modern addition to the ancient structure, likely used for utilities. Tunnel gives us the best chance at placing charges without early detection, I decided. We go in, plant explosives at the structural points, and get out before sunset. It should have worked. The intelligence was solid, our gear was cutting edge, and our experience unmatched. But something went wrong the moment we breached the tunnel entrance. We didn't trigger a conventional alarm, no sirens or flashing lights. Instead, the air pressure changed subtly, a soft whooshing sound barely perceptible even to our trained ears. Tommy noticed it first. "Did you feel that?" he asked, freezing mid-step. Before I could answer, we heard movement echoing through the tunnel system, too fast to be human. "They know we're here," Rob said, readying his weapon. We had perhaps 5 minutes before they found our position. Not enough time to retreat, not enough time to complete the mission as planned. I made a split-second decision. New plan. We move to the central chamber, plant the primary charges there. Forget the structural points. Tommy nodded grimly. Bigger boom, less precision. Exactly. In and out, 10 minutes max. We moved deeper into the tunnel system, our night vision equipment revealing a network more extensive than our intelligence had indicated. The complex extended deep into the mountain, with chambers carved into the living rock. Some tunnels showed signs of extreme age, ancient stonework crumbling after centuries. Others were modern, with electrical conduits and ventilation systems. The first attack came 7 minutes after the pressure change. A vampire dropped from a ventilation shaft above us, young, fast, but inexperienced. Rob put 2 silver rounds through its chest before it could raise an alarm. The body disintegrated into ash, leaving only scorched clothing behind. "They've evolved," Tommy whispered, kneeling to examine the remains. Complete cellular breakdown on death, no bodies to clean up. It was a disturbing development. Previous generations had left corpses behind, requiring disposal to maintain secrecy. This adaptation meant they could operate with less fear of leaving evidence. We continued forward, encountering light resistance. Mostly younger vampires left as sentries while the elders rested. Our silver ammunition worked as expected, but each encounter slowed our progress and increased the risk of alerting the main nest. The central chamber exceeded our intelligence estimates. Satellite imaging had shown a large room, but what we found was enormous. A cathedral-like space carved from the mountain itself. The ceiling rose at least 60 feet above us, supported by stone columns carved with symbols older than any language I recognized. The room was empty of furniture, except for a circular stone table in the center, surrounded by 13 ornate chairs. "Council chamber," I said, recognizing the setup from historical texts we'd studied. "This is where they make decisions. And where we end them," Tommy added, already unpacking the charges from his backpack. We worked quickly, placing thermite explosives at the base of each supporting column. The charges were designed specifically for vampire elimination, burning hot enough to incinerate any organic material within the blast radius. 14 charges in total, each with the destructive capacity to level a small building. We were nearly finished when Rob, who had taken a position by the main entrance to watch for threats, gave the warning signal. 3 clicks over our comm system. Company, his voice came quietly through my earpiece. At least 5, approaching from the east corridor. How long? I asked, placing the final charge. 2 minutes, maybe less. Not enough time to retreat the way we'd come in. Tommy, are the charges set? He nodded, activating the remote detonator. Ready to blow when we're clear. I surveyed the chamber, noting 3 exits besides the one we'd used to enter. We split up. Rob, take the north exit. Tommy, west. I'll go south. Rendezvous at extraction point in 30 minutes. Split up? Rob questioned. We've never... No choice. Too many of them to fight head-on. We divide their forces. Neither argued. After decades of operations together, they trusted my judgment. We clasped hands briefly, a ritual we'd developed years ago before high-risk separations. See you on the other side, Tommy said, his expression solemn. We moved to our assigned exits just as the first vampires entered the chamber from the east corridor. They spotted us immediately, their inhuman eyes cutting through the darkness better than our night vision equipment. Humans, one hissed, its voice carrying the distinctive accent of centuries past. Intruders in the sacred chamber. That was our cue to run. I took the south corridor at a sprint, hearing pursuit behind me. 2 vampires, judging by the footsteps. Too fast and too light to be human. The corridor twisted downward, deeper into the mountain, rather than toward the surface as I'd hoped. No time to double back. I'd have to find another way out. The passage opened into a smaller chamber filled with what appeared to be ancient texts, a library of sorts, with scrolls and bound volumes in glass cases. Under other circumstances, such a discovery would have been invaluable to our understanding of vampire history. Now it was just another room to move through quickly. The vampires entered the library seconds after me. One was younger, moving with the uncontrolled speed of a recent turning. The other moved more deliberately, an elder, judging by its pale skin and the ornate clothing it wore. Both bared fangs as they cornered me against the far wall. Night Crew, the elder said, recognition in its ancient eyes. You've hunted my kind for generations. I didn't bother responding, just raised my weapon and fired. The younger vampire dodged with supernatural speed, but the elder took 2 rounds to the chest. It staggered, but didn't fall, another concerning development. Silver ammunition that would have killed any vampire we'd encountered a decade ago now merely wounded it. The younger one lunged while I was focused on the elder. I barely sidestepped, firing at point-blank range into its torso. It collapsed into ash immediately, but the momentary distraction cost me. The elder moved with the fluid grace of centuries of experience, knocking my weapon away and pinning me against the wall. Your kind has interfered for the last time, it said, its breath carrying the sickly sweet smell of recent feeding. Tonight marks our return to our rightful place. I had a backup weapon. We all did after Jason's turning in Romania. A silver-edged combat knife concealed in my boot. As the vampire leaned in, fangs extended toward my neck, I drew the knife and drove it upward through its jaw and into its brain. The elder convulsed, its body turning to ash more slowly than the younger ones had. I retrieved my weapon and continued through the library, finding another corridor that angled upward toward the surface. I tried the comm system as I moved. Rob, Tommy, status report. Tommy responded first, his voice tight with exertion. West corridor leads to living quarters, heavily populated. I'm pinned down but still moving. No response from Rob. Rob, report, I repeated, feeling the first twinge of dread. Tommy's voice came again after a burst of static. I saw them drag something past my position, heading toward the main hall. Couldn't confirm identity. I picked up my pace, navigating the unfamiliar corridors based on my mental map of the complex. If Rob had been captured, I needed to reach him before they fed. A turned Rob Collins would be a nightmare opponent, all his tactical knowledge and experience working against us. The corridors began to look familiar as I approached the central chamber from a different angle. I heard voices ahead, multiple vampires speaking in a language I didn't recognize. I slowed, hugging the wall as I peered around the corner. The scene in the central chamber froze my blood. Rob was on his knees in the center of the room, surrounded by at least 8 vampires. His tactical gear had been stripped away, leaving him in the base layer. Blood soaked his shoulder where something had torn through flesh. An elder vampire stood before him, taller than the others, with skin so pale it was nearly translucent. Its eyes were solid black, no whites visible at all, and it wore robes that might have been centuries old. "Where are the others?" it asked in perfect English. Rob spat blood onto the stone floor. "Go to hell," the elder smiled, revealing fangs longer than any I'd seen before. "You misunderstand your situation. We don't need you to tell us. Your blood will." It was preparing to feed, to take not just Rob's blood, but his memories as well. Certain elder vampires could access the knowledge of their victims through blood consumption. If this one learned our escape routes, our extraction plan, Tommy's position, I had seconds to make an impossible choice. I raised my weapon, aimed carefully, and fired a single shot. The silver bullet struck Rob Collins in the back of the head, killing him instantly before the elder could feed. The vampires whirled toward my position, shrieks of rage filling the chamber. I was already moving, firing as I ran to create chaos rather than hoping to eliminate targets. The central chamber erupted into motion as more vampires poured in from other corridors. "Tommy!" I shouted into my comm. "Central chamber compromised. Heading to extraction point now. Meet you there." No response. I ran through unfamiliar corridors, pursued by multiple vampires. The complex was awakening despite the daylight hours outside, the elder leadership roused by the intrusion. Each turn brought me deeper into the maze-like structure without finding a clear path to the surface. My comm unit crackled. "Dave." Tommy's voice, strained and breathless. "Main hall, backup needed." I changed direction immediately, following corridor markers back toward the main hall. As I approached, I heard the distinctive whoosh of Tommy's flamethrower, followed by inhuman screams. The main hall was massive, clearly designed for gatherings of dozens or even hundreds. Tommy had established a defensive position at one end, using ancient furniture as a barricade. His flamethrower kept the vampires at bay, the creatures instinctively fearing fire even more than silver. "Took you long enough," he called as I reached his position, never taking his eyes off the approaching vampires. His face was bloody from a gash across his forehead, and he favored his left leg. "Rob's down," I said, taking position beside him. Tommy nodded once, no change in his expression. "Figured when he didn't respond. How many after you?" "At least 10. You." "More coming. They're coordinating, flanking maneuvers, trying to get behind us." He was right. The vampires had stopped their frontal assaults and were spreading along the walls, looking for angles around Tommy's flames. They were using military tactics, something we'd rarely encountered before. "We need to blow it now," I said. "No way we both make it out." Tommy glanced at the remote detonator on his belt. "Extraction point's 2 miles away. Blast radius will take down half the mountain. If we don't blow it, they'll complete whatever they're planning. Global coordination, Tommy. They'll come out of hiding everywhere at once." He nodded, understanding the stakes. "Main entrance is through that archway, 200 yards to daylight. I'll cover you." "We both go," I insisted. Tommy smiled grimly. "Not with this leg. Bastard nearly took it off in the corridor back there. I can stand, but I can't run." I knew he was right, but I couldn't accept it. "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are." He shoved the detonator into my hand. "Someone has to tell the world what happened here, what we did. All these years, someone has to make it mean something." The vampires were closing in, their coordinated movements bringing them ever closer to flanking positions. Tommy saw it too. "Go now," he said, adjusting the fuel mix on his flamethrower to burn hotter. "I'll give you a head start they won't forget." I clasped his shoulder one last time. 20 years of friendship, of fighting side by side against nightmares. No words seemed adequate. "I know," he said, reading my expression. "Now run." I ran. Behind me, Tommy unleashed a torrent of flame that filled the hall from wall to wall, creating a barrier between us and the vampires. Their shrieks of pain and rage followed me as I sprinted toward the main entrance. Daylight hit me like a physical force after hours in the dim interior. The castle entrance opened onto a stone courtyard surrounded by high walls. The outer gate stood open, designed for vehicles rather than foot traffic. Beyond it, forest stretched down the mountainside. I ran without looking back, the detonator clutched in my hand. Tommy would give me as much time as he could, but eventually they would overwhelm him. When that happened, they would come for me, daylight slowing but not stopping their pursuit. I reached the tree line and continued downhill, following the extraction plan. 2 miles to the pickup point where a helicopter would be waiting. 2 miles of rough mountain terrain with vampires potentially in pursuit. I heard Tommy's voice one last time through the comm system. "They're through." His transmission ended with the sound of his flamethrower firing at close range. Then nothing. I knew what had happened without seeing it. Tommy had made his stand, buying me time with his life. Now I had to make it count. I ran for 20 minutes, pushing beyond normal human endurance through sheer desperation. The forest provided cover, but also obstacles: fallen trees, hidden gullies, loose rocks. Twice I nearly twisted an ankle on unseen hazards. When I judged I'd covered at least a mile, I looked back toward the castle. It stood silhouetted against the morning sky, ancient and imposing. No pursuit visible yet, but that didn't mean they weren't coming. I needed to detonate the charges now, while I was still within range of the remote trigger, but far enough to survive the blast. Tommy had been right about the blast radius. The thermite charges would take down most of the mountain peak. I had to get further away. I pushed on, ignoring the burning in my lungs and the protest of overtaxed muscles. The extraction point appeared ahead, a small clearing barely large enough for a helicopter to land. No sign of the extraction team yet. They were scheduled to arrive after receiving my signal. I reached the clearing and immediately sent the extraction code through my secure communication device. Then I turned to face the mountain, detonator in hand. I owed Tommy and Rob a moment of acknowledgement before I destroyed their final resting place. 24 years of fighting together, of watching each other's backs in the darkness. Now I stood alone. I pressed the detonator. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the mountain peak erupted. The blast began at the central chamber where we'd placed most of the charges, but quickly spread through the complex. Secondary explosions followed as the thermite ignited anything flammable in its path. The ancient stone structure collapsed inward, centuries of vampire history disappearing in fire and smoke. The blast wave hit me seconds later, knocking me off my feet despite the distance. Debris rained down, stone fragments, ash, and dust. Something struck my left shoulder, tearing through my tactical gear and into flesh. More impacts followed, smaller fragments cutting my face, my hands, anything exposed. I curled into a protective position until the worst had passed. When I looked up, the castle was gone. In its place, a burning crater glowed with the unnatural blue-white fire of thermite charges. Nothing could survive that inferno, not even elder vampires with centuries of resilience. My shoulder burned where the fragment had struck. I examined the wound, finding a jagged piece of stone embedded deeply. I woke before dawn, my decision crystallized during the brief hours of sleep I'd managed. The completed manuscript sat on my laptop, 24 years of classified operations, documented in meticulous detail. Today marked the end of Colonel Adams' 48-hour ultimatum, but I wouldn't be returning to Quantico for further negotiations. The truth deserved a different path. After a quick shower and coffee, I gathered everything I'd prepared overnight, 3 waterproof cases containing hard evidence that would support my story. I'd carefully selected items that could be independently verified. satellite imagery showing vampire nest locations that corresponded with reported terrorist activities, medical reports documenting the unique physiology of turned humans we'd neutralized, and sworn statements from 3 former government officials who had known about the program but left service. The Washington Post building stood as a monument to journalism in downtown D.C., its imposing facade a fitting place to bring a story that would change human understanding of our world. I parked in a public garage 2 blocks away, a habit from years of operational security. The weight of the evidence cases felt appropriate as I walked through the cool morning air. 2 decades of secrets balanced in my hands. The security desk in the lobby represented my first obstacle. I hadn't made an appointment, and my story sounded like the ravings of a conspiracy theorist without the evidence to back it up. "I need to speak with an investigative reporter," I told the guard, keeping my voice level and professional. "I have classified information regarding national security that needs to be made public." The guard, a retired police officer by his bearing, had likely heard similar claims before. His expression remained neutral as he picked up his phone and called the newsroom. "Got someone down here with alleged classified information," he said, eyeing me skeptically. "Says it's national security related." He paused, listening. "No appointment. Name?" "David Mitchell," I said. "Former U.S. Army." He relayed this information and waited. After a moment, he nodded and hung up. "Someone will be down to meet you. Wait over there." He pointed to a small seating area. I sat with the cases on my lap, fingers tapping restlessly against the reinforced plastic. The building bustled with the energy of a major news operation. Staff coming and going, delivery people bringing packages, the background hum of a place where information was currency. 10 minutes later, a woman stepped off the elevator and approached the security desk. She was in her mid-30s, with auburn hair cut in a practical shoulder-length style and sharp green eyes that surveyed the lobby with practiced efficiency. Her business attire, charcoal pantsuit over a white blouse, projected professional competence. The guard pointed toward me, and she turned, assessing me with a quick glance before walking over. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Sarah Campbell, investigative desk." Her handshake was firm, her voice clipped and businesslike. "I understand you have information regarding national security." "Yes," I said, standing to match her eye level. "I have evidence of a classified government program that's been operating for 24 years. The public deserves to know about it." Her expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes, the look of someone who had heard extraordinary claims before and found them wanting. "We get many people coming in with government conspiracy theories," she said carefully. "What makes your information different?" I held up one of the waterproof cases. Verifiable evidence, documentation, satellite imagery, medical reports, and my own first-hand account as the last surviving member of a military unit called the Night Crew. Something in my delivery must have registered as different from the usual conspiracy theorists because she studied me more carefully. "Military background?" she asked. "Army Rangers initially, then specialized operations for 24 years. She nodded once. "Let's go somewhere we can talk privately." I followed her to the elevator, where she used a keycard to access the upper floors. We rode in silence to the 5th floor, then walked through an open newsroom filled with desks, computers, and the buzz of journalists at work. She led me to a small conference room with glass walls and closed the door. "Okay, Mr. Mitchell, you have 15 minutes to convince me this isn't a waste of my time." I opened the first case and laid out its contents on the table. 8 folders containing satellite imagery of operations in Eastern Europe, North Africa, and South America. These show thermal imagery of vampire nests we eliminated between 2000 and 2015, I explained, opening one folder to reveal satellite photos of a compound in Libya. This operation was publicly attributed to a terrorist bombing, but it was actually my unit eliminating 3 high-level government officials who had been turned by vampires. Sarah's expression shifted from professional skepticism to outright disbelief. "Vampires," she repeated flatly. "Yes," I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. "They're real." My unit hunted them for 24 years under strict classification. I've documented everything. I placed my external hard drive on the table. This contains my complete account, including details of every major operation. She made no move to touch either the folders or the hard drive. Mr. Mitchell, do you have any idea how this sounds? Completely insane, I acknowledged. I'd react the same way in your position. That's why I brought evidence that can be independently verified. I opened the second case, removing medical files and laying them beside the satellite imagery. These are autopsy reports from individuals we eliminated after they were turned. Note the physiological changes: altered cellular structure, elongated canine teeth, modified cardiovascular system. Sarah leaned forward slightly, professional curiosity temporarily overriding her skepticism. She pulled one of the medical reports closer, scanning it with practiced efficiency. These look authentic, she admitted, but they could be fabricated. They contain verification codes in the header. Your paper's fact-checkers can confirm they came from legitimate government databases. I tapped the report she was examining. This subject was a former Green Beret named Marcus Reynolds. He was turned during an operation in Brazil in 2010. Check military records. He's listed as killed in action, but the body was never returned to his family. Standard procedure for turned operators. She made a note on a small pad she'd pulled from her pocket. Even if these documents are genuine, they could document some kind of biological weapon effects or unknown disease, not supernatural creatures. I had expected this response. From my third case, I removed a thumb drive and placed it on the table. Body camera footage from our operations. This shows vampires in action, their speed, strength, and feeding behavior. It also shows how we neutralized them. Sarah picked up the thumb drive, turning it over in her fingers. Why now? If this has been successfully classified for decades, why come forward? 3 days ago, I led the final mission of the night crew. We eliminated the vampire leadership structure in the Carpathian Mountains, but it cost the lives of my last 2 teammates. I'm the only one left who knows the full truth. I leaned forward. With their leadership gone, the remaining vampire nests worldwide will be disorganized, making this the safest time to reveal their existence. But they'll eventually reorganize. The public deserves to know what's out there. She studied me for a long moment. And what do you get out of this? Probably a prison cell, I answered honestly. Publishing classified information this sensitive is treason. But after 24 years of watching good people die to keep everyone else safe, I can't stay silent anymore. Someone needs to know what we sacrificed. Sarah tapped her pen against her notepad, weighing my story. Finally, she opened her laptop and inserted the thumb drive. Let's see what you've got. For the next 20 minutes, we watched footage from my body camera during an operation in Prague 4 years earlier. The night vision video showed our team entering an abandoned factory building, encountering the unnaturally fast movements of vampires and the brutal efficiency with which we eliminated them. The footage captured everything. The vampires' inhuman strength as one tossed Rob Collins across a room like a rag doll, their feeding attempt on a civilian hostage, and the effectiveness of our silver ammunition and UV light weapons. Sarah's expression changed gradually as she watched, skepticism giving way to shock, then focused professional interest. She paused the video when it showed a clear image of a vampire's face, eyes completely black, extended fangs visible as it hissed at the camera. This could be faked, she said, but her tone lacked conviction. It could, I agreed, but cross-reference the dates and locations with unexplained attacks worldwide. Check the names of my team members against military records. They all exist, and they're all listed as killed in action on the dates I've documented. She closed her laptop and sat back, processing everything I'd shown her. If, and that's a significant if, this is true, publishing it would cause global panic. That's why I'm not posting it on the internet myself. The story needs context, verification, and proper presentation. It needs a journalist who understands the implications. Sarah gathered the documents I'd spread across the table, organizing them into a neat stack. I'll need to verify these independently. If they check out, I'll need to bring in my editor. How long will that take? For something this explosive? At least 3 to 4 days for preliminary verification. Longer for a full fact check before publication. I nodded. That's acceptable. But you should know something. I left the government's employ against orders. Once they realize what I'm doing, they'll try to stop this story from coming out. Government pressure isn't new to us, Mr. Mitchell. She handed me her business card. I'll call you tomorrow with initial findings. If your evidence holds up to scrutiny, we'll proceed from there. As we prepared to leave the conference room, Sarah paused, looking at me with new intensity. One more question. These creatures, have they all been eliminated? I shook my head. No. We destroyed their leadership and many of their major nests, but there are still hundreds, maybe thousands worldwide. Without central coordination, they'll be less effective, more focused on survival than expansion. But they're still out there. And they could be anyone? Neighbors, co-workers, government officials? Yes. They look completely human until they feed or fight. That's what made them so dangerous, and why the program remained classified for so long. She absorbed this with remarkable composure. I'll call you tomorrow, Mr. Mitchell. We walked back through the newsroom, where other journalists glanced curiously in our direction. At the elevator, Sarah turned to me one last time. If this checks out, it's the biggest story in human history, she said quietly. I know. I left the Washington Post building with mixed emotions. Relief at finally sharing the burden of knowledge, uncertainty about the consequences, and a lingering sense of loyalty to the secrecy I'd maintained for decades. The morning sun felt strange on my face. I had operated in darkness for so long that daylight sometimes seemed unnatural. My phone rang as I reached the public garage where I'd parked. The number displayed on the screen was blocked, but I knew immediately who it was. Mitchell, I answered. What the hell do you think you're doing? Colonel Adams's voice was tightly controlled, but I knew her well enough to hear the fury beneath her professional tone. How did you find me? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Your phone has always been monitored. Did you really think we wouldn't track your movements? The Washington Post, Mitchell? You actually went through with it? I walked between rows of parked cars, keeping my voice low. The 48 hours are up, Colonel. I made my decision. This is treason. Do you understand? You'll spend the rest of your life in a federal prison. Maybe, I acknowledged, but the story will still come out. We can shut down any story. National security protocols give us that authority. Not if the evidence is already being verified by multiple sources. I reached my car but didn't get in, leaning against the driver's door instead. The story will publish within 72 hours, Colonel. I'm giving you that time to prepare an official response. The government needs to get ahead of this, explain what's been done to protect people, outline plans for public safety now that the truth is coming out. Silence stretched on the other end of the line. When Adams spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge. 24 years, Mitchell. You kept the secret for 24 years. Why throw it all away now? Because Rob and Tommy deserved better than unmarked graves and redacted service records. Because the public deserves to know what's out there in the darkness. Because I'm tired of lying. Another lengthy silence. They're coming for you, she finally said. I can't stop it. I know. Was it worth it? She asked, and for a moment I heard the person behind the rank, the woman who had overseen the night crew program for almost as long as I'd been part of it. Ask me in 72 hours, I replied. I ended the call and got into my car. The clock was running now. Sarah Campbell would verify my evidence and the story would break, assuming I remained free long enough to see it happen. Adams wasn't bluffing about sending people to arrest me. The only question was how soon they would arrive. I started the car and pulled out of the garage, merging into DC morning traffic. For the first time in 24 years, I had no mission parameters, no extraction plan, no team backing me up. Just the truth I'd carried for too long, finally making its way into the light.